Hello, my name is Matty, I'm assistant editor at the magazine, and I'd like to share a fun technique that can completely transform portraits of your friends and family. The technique enables you to digitally dye the colour of your subject's hair, giving them an edgy, high-fashion look in an instant, and turns an image like this into something like this. You can choose the colour of the hair, and to take the fun even further, I'll show you how you can even introduce a secondary colour for some full-on funk. Ready to get started? Let's close down the final image and see how this technique comes together. Okay, so open up the image in Photoshop or Elements that you'd like to edit. Alternatively, you can use our image, which is called haircolor.jpg and can be found in the Start Images folder. It's a fantastic shot of a lovely model called Lauren, but let's face it, although it has bags of attitude, it does miss a certain something, and the change in hair colour will fix this portrait up a treat. Our first task is to make sure the background colour is pure white. I shot this image in a studio, and unfortunately the background is a little bit grey, but don't worry, we can fix that in an instant. Let's bring in our layers palette, as we're going to be using this quite extensively during the technique. If you can't find your layers palette, don't panic, just head up to Window and then scroll down to Layers. Within the Layers panel, you'll find a number of options, but the one we want is called Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer, and this is identified by a half black, half white icon. If you click on it, a list of options will appear. Now the one we want to fix our problematic background is Levels, so scroll down and select Levels. So now we've got our Levels adjustment panel, and it does look a bit complicated, but don't worry about that. There's a histogram on here, and there's also 3 eyedroppers. The one we want is at the bottom, as this sets the white point in the image. Hover anywhere over your background image and simply click the mouse button once. There we go, our background's turned to pure white. And this technique will work perfectly if you shoot your model in the kitchen against a white wall and it doesn't come out quite right. Now, you may have noticed that areas of the subject's face have slightly overexposed due to the levels change, but don't worry, we can fix this really quickly. Simply head over to the toolbox and select the brush. Let's get rid of the layers adjustment panel for the moment, we don't need that. Now, with the brush selected, what we're going to do is hide some of this levels adjustment layer that is overexposed to the subject's skin. Make sure your brush is set to black. If it isn't, simply hit D and then X and that will reset the colours. So we've got our black brush, and you can actually change the size of it using the square bracket keys. All you have to do is paint over the face, and you see all that detail come back. Watch out for the areas like the hands, don't forget them, because they'll be overexposed too. So there we go, you'll see we've brought back all those areas that were overexposed, and that's taken just a minute. Now we can move on to the really fun part of this technique. Head back to the Layers panel, and once again, click on the Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer. This time though, skip past Levels and head down to Hue Saturation. Let's drag in the Hue Saturation adjustment panel so you can see what's going on. Now within this panel, we've got 3 options: Hue, Saturation and Lightness. Now the one we want first is Hue. This is going to change the colour of the hair. Drag it left to right and you'll see the hair colour change. I want to give our subject a nice pink shock of hair. I think we've found the right hue there. Now that hair colour is looking great, but I want to intensify the saturation. So drag the saturation slider to the right until it really pops. That looks brilliant. There we go. Okay, we can move this panel out the way once more so we can see what we're doing. You'll notice, although the hair colour's changed, well, so's the subject's face, their skin tones, their clothes, pretty much everything in the frame, except for that white background. How can we fix this? Well, with the brush still selected and still set to black, all we have to do is hide this layer. So we can start brushing it out, and the original layer will show through. So you see the skin tones coming back there? And the original colour of the jumper. That's looking good, but the face area is going to be a bit more tricky. So I'm going to zoom in, and to do this, I press Ctrl and plus. So by zooming in, that gives us a really good close-up view of the subject's face. Now we can move on to delicately hiding that layer and revealing the subject's true skin tones. So let's change the size of the brush and start to brush out that layer very carefully and very slowly. Don't have to rush this time. Steady as you go, and you can see all that colour is disappearing, and the subject's true skin tones are slowly starting to come back into frame. That's looking really good there. Let's just tidy that up around the forehead. That's always a tricky part. And then a few last bits on the jumper as well. So that's starting to look really good, and there's already a dramatic transformation. Let's zoom out and see where we've come from. So that was our start image. Nice portrait of Lauren. The background, big grey, not that inspiring. A quick levels adjustment layer, and that's completely sorted out the background. And then the hue saturation layer, and the hair's changed to a nice pink hue. So I'm pretty happy with this image so far, but there's a few areas I think that might need a bit more work. Let's zoom in again. Yes, and you can see the areas around the hair, those little strands, and also a bit on the jumper as well. They need fixing as well. Oh, and a tiny bit on the face that I missed there. So what we need to do is zoom in even closer. Just spend a bit of time changing the brush size, moving around the subject's face. Just go steady, a bit at a time, and that will avoid leaving any pink marks on the subject's face. What about these tricky areas here where the hair sort of merges over the jumper? Well, there's a little trick we can try here that I think is going to work a treat. So what you do is, we've already got our brush selected. Go to the tool options and change the opacity of the brush to around 30%. And this time, when you brush out the colour, it'll be far more delicate and a much more pleasant blend. And because we're using a layer mask, if you do make a mistake and you brush out some of that lovely pink, all you have to do is change the colour to white and brush it back in there. That's the beauty of layer masks. You can change things very, very quickly. So that's looking much better. And the last bit over Lauren's skin. There we go. That's lovely. Let's zoom out to see how it's looking. Okay, that's looking fantastic, but I'm not happy with one hair colour change. I want two to really give it that funky makeover look. So, how am I going to add the second colour? Well, all you have to do is duplicate the hue saturation adjustment layer. And to do this, click Ctrl and J. The hair colour will change immediately, but don't worry about this too much. All you have to do is bring in your hue saturation adjustment panel one more time, and then drag the hue slider left or right. Okay, so for this time I'm going to go for a deep purple look, a bit like the band. So let's move the hue saturation panel out of the way one more time. The brush is set to black, but remember, the opacity is still down at 30%. So let's move this up to 100 again. And just head back up to the subject's head and paint out an area of the hair. There we go, the two-tone look is looking fantastic. If I was a hairdresser, I could charge hundreds for this, you know. Now, of course, in real life, the hair colour wouldn't just change from one colour to the other. There'd be an area where it's sort of blended in between. And we can recreate this using the brush. Head back down to the tool options and change the opacity slider down to 30% one last time. Change the size of the brush, and where the two colours join, just brush away there and you'll see it blend in nicely. Okay, let's look at the layers again and see how far we've come with this technique. So we started off with the nice portrait. We sorted out the background, we changed the hair colour, and we added a second colour, all in the space of a few minutes. If you wanted to, you could add a third and a fourth colour. The possibilities are endless. You can now save the image by clicking File, Save As, and saving the image in whichever format you wish. So, have fun getting creative and giving your subjects a digital makeover, and I'll see you next time.